Thank you, Charlie, and thank you to CED for inviting me to speak. Some of you may want to take some pharmaceutical products at the back of the room at the end of my presentation, because it's not a happy picture politically in terms of what we're faced. Last night there were many definitions of statesmen, statespersons. I found it very interesting, but generally when it comes to this issue, a statesman is a dead politician. And in fact, the panels that are coming up with a variety of alternatives, they're great alternatives, are all former politicians. So you're either a former politician or a dead politician. Now, it has been mentioned that there are very few statesmen in business with respect to this issue, and I want to commend CED for almost a decade trying to educate the business community in America to take a stand on this. As I was discussing this earlier, many business people see no opportunity in taking risk on this particular situation, unfortunately. But you're helping to turn that around. I'd like to talk about two things. The context of decisions related to the debt and the deficit right now, the political context, and the context post-2010 election. And secondly, what I think maybe will be some of the outcomes to the Commission and other recommendations that are coming out. I'm going to remind you that this was a historic election, and indeed, Mr. President, it was about jobs. It was about jobs the last election also, and it was about jobs and anger combined, and we had a historic election, as you know, in that we have to go back to 1938 to have the turnover record that we had in this election, with 62, maybe more turnover in terms of new Republicans. Now, one of the overall pictures here is the loss of moderates, the loss of blue dog Democrats. It's really a loss of moderates that's been going on for 40 years. When I first worked as a staff member, Tom, a couple years before this, in the U.S. Senate, there were about a third of the people in the Senate and the House that could be considered moderate if you use a ideological support score measure of how people vote, and it's now down to about 5%. The endangered species in Washington is not the polar bear. It is a moderate. It used to be a moderate Republican. Now it's a moderate Democrat. And the T group movement has made it worse. The Republican Party, in my opinion, has moved even further to the right and will move further to the right in the House and the Senate as a result of this election. And we return to divided party government. Now, you never have that in a parliamentary system, divided party government. The presidential support scores, or in other words, the batting average of a president getting things through that he wants, will drop dramatically. And this president, most people don't realize that, hit a record in terms of his batting average. It was about 94% in the House and about 97% in the Senate. It's likely to drop dramatically, and we're likely to move into deadlock again. The difficult thing out of this election is we see that it's very difficult for a moderate to run and win. And the primaries are still the real election. The last election we had 65 seats that were competitive, 55% or less, 62 before that, 29 seats, pardon me, in the House before that. This time looks like we have about 105 seats, but there are 435 seats. That means the real election in the rest of them frequently is the primary election, and the primary election has very low turnout. The primary election turnout on average since the 80s is 18%. This year it looks like it's up to about 18% again. In the general election, by the way, midterm turnout is 39%. On average, it was 41.3% this year. The point is, people are not engaged, and when they're not engaged in the primary, the people who are engaged dominate who gets nominated. And those people frequently are a bit further to the right and a bit further to the left. If they have a competitive general election, they generally move to the middle, in my opinion. Now, I think I'll let Tom speak for himself, but I think we disagree on the solution, Tom. I think the solution is to have commissions do redistricting as they do in the United Kingdom, Canada, and to bring about not only equal populations, compact and contiguous, but also bring about more competition so that in the general election you have people moving to the middle and you bring more moderates back. There is a debate in the discipline about whether that would happen. I lean towards that solution. The context. The context is that people in America are impatient, and they want to go to heaven without dying. They would like to have lower taxes and balance the budget and get rid of the debt and the deficit. They'd like to have all of their entitlement programs, don't touch Medicare, Social Security, and by the way, lower taxes and still try to do something about debt and deficit. I disagree slightly with the comment that this election was about debt and deficit. I don't think it was. It was about the economy. In the CBS exit poll, the economy was the most important issue by 62%. 86% were worried about the economy. But in terms of reaction to doing something about the economy, it's very interesting. 33% said that the stimulus helped the economy. 34% said it hurt the economy. And 31% said there was no difference as a result of the stimulus package. So what do you do as a leader if you're driven to get reelected? What is the message? Healthcare reform, which deals to a great extent it's about cost control to a great extent, that bill, in my opinion. 31% say, let's expand it. 16% say, let's leave it alone. And 48% in the exit poll say, let's repeal it. So what do you do? What's the direction? The direction is unclear, but the Republicans in the House of Representatives seem to want to have some action in response, especially to the Tea Group movement, to do something about health care bill, and they'll probably vote to repeal it, and it may go through, but it'll die in the Senate because, as everyone knows here, we are the only legislative assembly in the world that calls for a supermajority to get normal things done, 60 votes. And it's also the most malapportioned legislative assembly in the world also. South Dakota has the same 2 senators as California. What's happening with partisanship? Going into this election, 33% said they were Democrats, 36% said they were independents, and 25% said they were Republicans. Independents are growing. We have de-alignment going on, and Republicans are declining, and Democrats are about the same in terms of context. Well, what do the new leaders face in the House and the Senate? I think they face extreme partisanship. America in the polls, in some Pew Charitable Trust polls that I ran in the past and others that I've seen, think that the institution is too partisan, but they're not taking that as a direction to come to the middle. Secondly, there's, as a result of this, a lack of civility and comity. It certainly is not like when Tom and I first worked in the House and the Senate, where I worked for Hubert Humphrey. His best friend was Goldwater. It didn't seem like that from the outside, but they liked each other. They got along. One of the reasons they did is there wasn't a strong Tuesday-Thursday club. You've all heard about this. It's a serious problem. I want to re-emphasize that this is a problem in terms of deliberation. The institution, that means people are there Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. They don't get to know each other. They fly home to California for a fundraiser to be with the family that lives there. They really only get to know each other when they're lobbing bombs at each other in the committees and on the floor, and that's not a way to come to some solutions. We also have the permanent campaign. It's already started, and that's related to the commission. Both parties immediately, the leaders of both parties, except for Senator Reid, have criticized the plans that have come out from the co-chairs and from others. There's no central core of authority, no central force forcing solutions to the middle where I think we need to have this. I've had students in my graduate class try to deal with this issue all semester. how to deal with a debt and a deficit. Even the libertarians on the far right say we need to raise taxes, and the socialists, yes, we still have them, Joe, on the far left, have come together, and they said, you know, and they get angry, first of all, because they didn't know much about it, but they get angry, and we've got to come to the middle, and we've got to have some solutions. I don't see that from our politicians. I predict that there is greater, right now, understanding of the problem, and when you have a consensus about the problem, debt and deficit, it's easier to go to consensus. I think this is the first time, actually, in the polls where we have a significant number of people in the polls saying this is a problem. But then we lose consensus among voters, but especially decision makers, when it comes to solutions to the problem. But the first step is here. They understand it's a problem. Before, they didn't understand it was a problem. That's important. I think we've got a form of hyper-pluralism. Bear with me on the jargon. We have extremely strong interest groups surrounding this issue that disagree with each other. And we've come to deadlock outside the institution, which then is reflected inside the institution and through the parties. And we all know we have serious limits on resources, a large debt and deficit, and you need to come together, I think, to do something about it. I think the central problem facing us is getting the votes for long-term solutions, as you well know, at short-term political risk. And when we have 2-year election cycles, people are not willing to take that risk. So take your drugs. I'm sorry, that's as I see it.